Hi, welcome to TriTech series of videos. Today we have a TriTech T5 and we're going to repack it and show you all the necessary tools that you're going to need to do that and the proper way of replacing the packings. Before we get started, I'm just going to give you a little explanation on how the unit works. So this is your pressure control. This is your on-off switch. Turn the unit on. The unit will not turn on until you slightly increase the pressure on the pressure control. Then the motor will start to turn. Your on-off switch does three things. It is a circuit breaker. So if there's a short to ground in the unit or if there's a short to ground in the outlet, this will trip. It's also thermal protection, so if there's something wrong with the circuit board or if the motor runs too hot, it's going to sense that heat inside the control box and shut the motor off. The pressure control or potentiometer regulates the amount of current that goes to the motor. So when you're priming or if you're cleaning, it's always recommended to run at less than half speed. You don't want to spin the pump too fast when you're priming or cleaning. It's not necessary. So once the bypass valve is flipped up and the unit is building pressure, then this determines how fast the motor turns with the size tip that you're using. So if you're using 11 thousandths or 9 thousandths or 13 thousandths, the motor is going to turn very slow because the output is less. The bigger the tip that you put in, so 21, 23, 25, you're going to be spraying at higher pressure, the motor's going to turn faster. So now we're going to determine that there is a problem with the packings or there's a problem with the fluid section. You get a unit that is not building pressure or it is not stopping. So it could be the lower packing. If the lower packing is worn, it's going to recirculate inside the pump and the pump will not stop, even though the balls and seats are good. If it's the upper packing, you're going to see paint coming out the T-slot in your front cover plate. That's going to leak paint to atmosphere. So if you see any one of those conditions, you're going to want to remove the fluid manifold and examine the inlet seat, the outlet seat, and your packings and your piston rod. So we're going to go ahead now and remove our fluid manifold from our pump. Side cover plate has been put back on. We want to make sure that this is protected. There's no reason to have this off during our repair, so we put that back on. Now, in order to pull the fluid manifold off, we have to take our front cover plate off. First thing we want to do is loosen and remove the transducer from the fluid manifold. So we loosen our retaining bolt. And then you want to grab a pair of needle nose pliers and just hold on to the shaft to make sure that the transducer shaft doesn't turn as you're unthreading it. Once that's done, you pull it out. You want to make sure that your transducer gasket is in place, that you can visually see it, and that it's on the transducer. Sometimes they may get stuck inside the fluid manifold, so ours is right here. That's a good spot for it to be. Next thing we want to do is put the pump on its back. And then we use a 5/8 socket. And we want to remove the mounting bolts. Then we're going to turn the unit back on its legs and we're going to remove our motor housing. The reason we do this is it just makes taking the fluid manifold on and off a lot simpler. There's only 3 screws that hold it in place. Once you have that off, you want to examine the motor and the fan. If there's a lot of overspray built up on your fan or on the top of your motor housing, you want to wipe that down. You don't want to use solvent. You just use a clean, dry cloth, clean out all the overspray that's in your fan. So our bolts are removed, our transducer is removed, and we go ahead and we spin our fan, and that pushes the fluid manifold down. Then we can just slide it off of the pump. So this is your pump and your filter, all one part. Now we're going to remove the piston and your inlet valve and examine our packings. It's not necessary, but I always just put it in a vise. It's easier to hold on to everything. While you got this here, you might as well take your fluid filter off. Take your filter screen and your support and your filter housing and put them in some cleaning solution to get them cleaned while you're doing the service. Then we're going to loosen our upper packing retainer. We're not going to take it off just yet. And then we're going to take off our foot valve. This slot between your inlet valve retainer and your foot valve housing is there on purpose. The reason for the slot is that you can put a straight blade screwdriver in there and pry that up to make it easier to remove. You want to examine this O-ring. This O-ring is in the repair kit. If this is worn or damaged, you replace it. If it's not, it's good to reuse it. Before you remove your ball and your seat, you want to mark your seat with a Sharpie so you know what side was up when you take it out, because you're troubleshooting what the problem could be. So I just make a little mark, and so you know what side of the seat is up. Your inlet seat, you want to look at the beveled edge to make sure everything is uniform and there's no chips or imperfections. You get a new ball in your repair kit, but while you're trying to figure out what your problem is, you want to examine that. The O-ring that is on the outside and on the bottom of your foot valve housing, if they're in good condition, you don't need to replace them. If they're damaged or worn, then you replace them. They're in the repair kit. We remove our upper packing retainer. And then this is your upper piston guide. This has got to get replaced. Now that that's done, we can knock our piston out. And we want to take a look at our packings while they're still in the pump. You don't want to remove the packings unless you intend to change them. So if there's a cut or a worn mark in both the lower packing or the upper packing, then you know you have to change it. To get them out, the easiest way is just take a straight blade screwdriver, put it on the lip, and give it a tap. So there's your upper packing, and you do the same for your lower packing. So once your packings are out, you want to examine them for cuts or wear marks. Well, that's also, you want to look at your piston rod. You can run your thumbnail across it, see if there's any scratches or wear lines, and you want to look at that it's still uniform in dimension. To get your outlet valving housing out, the easiest way to do that is to just slide it back onto your piston rod and use a 5/16 Allen wrench. Once you get it loose, then you can thread it out. But the crank slider will hold the piston in place very strong. You don't have to worry about any issues with that. Once you have the outlet valve housing out, you want to look at your outlet valve housing and look at the seat, the beveled edges, make sure there's no scratches or chips or imperfections, and you examine your O-ring for wear or damage. If it is, you can replace it. It's in the repair kit. If it's in good condition, it's okay to reuse it. Now you can examine your outlet ball. Also, we're troubleshooting, so we want to look at the condition of the ball to make sure that it's no imperfections or dents or scratches. We want to examine our piston, make sure it's in uniform condition, that there are no scratches or imperfection on the upper part of the piston and the lower part of the piston. This is our packing kit. Included in the packing kit are all the necessary seals, your upper and lower packing. They come on a tool, a shipping tool, so this is not necessary to use in the repair, so you can remove them from your packings. When you go to replace them. This is all your different seals, your inlet ball and outlet ball, and your upper piston guide. Those are the things you want to replace. There's a small tube of grease. You want to put a little bit of the grease inside the packings when you go to replace it. There's an instruction sheet that shows you all the parts breakdown. For a detailed explanation on how to make all the repairs and how to remove everything step by step, refer to your TriTech T5 owner's manual. Okay, so now we're going to reassemble. So you get your outlet ball, goes inside your piston, your outlet valve housing, thread that in, take your 5/16 Allen key, thread it as far in as you can by hand, insert it back onto your crank slider, and tighten. We put our inlet seat. If one side is damaged, you can flip it over and use the other side. Our new inlet ball and our inlet ball retainer. That just pushes in. Remember I said this gap is there intentionally, so that's normal condition. Once that's done, then you take your piston and put it inside your foot valve housing, and you can then put your lower packing in place and put your upper packing in. You can put your upper piston guide in your upper packing retainer. Thread that in. Then you take your foot valve assembly with your piston in it, insert it into your lower packing. Because the packings are new, you're going to use a tool to thread it the rest of the way in. Once that's in, you can see your piston is up through your upper packing retainer. Just grab a pair of needle nose pliers, pry your piston up, and align the slots front to back. And now your filter and your filter support and housing are clean. You can reinstall them. Now your pump is ready to go back onto the unit. Take your fluid manifold, slide your piston onto the crank slider assembly, and then rotate the fan to bring the fluid section up to line up on the dowel pins. Once that's in, then you can slide your transducer assembly forward and get the transducer retainer started. You don't want to thread this all the way down just yet. Now we want to return our motor housing back to the unit. And we just flip the unit onto its back. And we put our pump mounting bolts back through your fluid manifold. Then we can finish tightening our transducer housing. Just before you make the final, you want to make sure you hold that transducer housing with a pair of needle nose. Keep it from rotating. Motor housing is returned. Transducer is threaded and snug. Fluid manifold is tight. Our manifold bolts are snugged up. We've cleaned our filter and filter support. Now we're going to return the front cover plate. And we're going to take our piston lube and we're going to put 2 drops of piston lube in our T-slot. And then we're going to attach our siphon assembly and bypass hose and test our repair. Make sure we've corrected the problem. Thanks for watching our TriTech series of videos. Okay, now we're going to remove our bypass valve. So the first thing we need to do is knock out the pin. You just use a punch, or you can use the same pin. You push that through, pin comes out, and you remove the handle and the cam. And then you can use a 3/4 socket and unthread the valve from the housing. This is your replacement part. You get a new one. You just reinstall it. Thread it down snug. There's a dowel pin on the cam that lines up into your hole. There's a flat side to the stem that goes to the down position. You line that slot up and down, and you can see inside the cam there's a corresponding dimension the same as your stem. That goes on. Take your pin, hammer it home, you're done.